here. Michael, I was putting that bookmark back in there with you, and for the general knowledge of listeners who aren't too familiar with this stuff, you began a testing program. Could you just give it kind of briefly what you initiated and what took place?
We with the help of the 125 or so volunteers with this website group, we put out the word we'd like to collect some surface samples, and so we trained people during for a day at two different locations, one in Capitola, one in Prunedale, and had multiple sessions and trained people in groups of about 10 till we had enough people. We gave them sample kits, and then they went out into the field and they collected samples mostly at their residences, at exposed areas where the fallout had settled. It was really important to do because this was, about a week after the fire and just before the new rains came in. So, the rains would come and they would certainly dilute and wash those surfaces, because of the rain itself. And so we were able to mobilize quickly and get 125 samples of surfaces in a representative, defensible, scientifically accurate way. We posted the data. We provided it to the health department, to the EPA. It's profound. It shows very, very clearly that there's an elevation of heavy metal contaminants, and we sampled for 4 heavy metal contaminants that are indicative of battery storage fires: lithium, nickel, manganese, and cobalt. So those are the 4 big ones, and we did that. And here is, if you can see, those points represent each of the 124 samples for the 4 metals. So 4 times 124 are right there. And by contrast, the Monterey County Health Department, they collected 8 samples. And so our data certainly is valuable. We assured, because I was involved and we trained these people, and they followed a scientific protocol as they were trained to do to collect these samples appropriately. And this is something that I'm sure this data is going to be looked at and scrutinized. We hope it is, and interpreted. And we're in the process now of determining what the levels mean. And so we have a lot of work's been going on behind the scenes relative to that. And we're going to be publishing some of the data with recommended guidance levels that have been peer reviewed, by toxicologists, industrial hygienists, that'll put them in perspective as to what the numbers mean.
Wow, thank you. That's awesome. Shiree, if you were to look at dare I say, our state government, their response, when I think in terms of that, you say that you've had, 4,000 members of your page group, and very possibly there still may be thousands out there who are experiencing some symptoms that are not even possibly, I'm not sure, aware of what's going on. What do you think? Doesn't it seem like, what do you think?
Well, when you say what has been their response, there has basically been no response from our government. Glenn Church is the only person that has spoke out and said that this is catastrophic, that, he has said how devastating this is. However, when I called his office and spoke to his secretary, she basically said that he did not have the power to make the changes or make, to take any necessary steps to help the community.
Glenn Church is he's a supervisor of Monterey County?
He's the supervisor for that district, right, which includes Moss Landing. Okay. So of course, there's been a lot of people who have reached out to, our state senator, John Laird, our governor, Newsom. We've reached out to the president. We've reached out to Kennedy, because, he is part of that environmental instance, Senator Laird, when he had the opportunity to address the people, he basically did not address the people. In fact, one comment he made was basically, oh, well, I have secured $1 million to eradicate the eucalyptus trees in Moss Landing. Has nothing to do with the people that are sick and suffering. Nothing. So we just have not had a response. We just haven't. And I mean, and because Angie and I and a few others have put ourselves in those positions where we are making, connections with our neighbors and residents in the area, we hear a lot of stories that it's horrible. I had somebody reach out to me at 2:00 in the morning and say, I have now lost my home, I've lost my job, and I'm homeless and jobless, and in direct relation because they were so ill from living in their home. And I am sure that the government has heard these stories. I have called, I have asked them to do something to help provide housing for people temporarily. I even recommended they, take the steps like they did during COVID. During COVID, they opened up San Lorenzo State Park and had RVs there. I said, even if you're not going to provide the RVs, how about you open up a park and allow the people who do have RVs to park there so that they can continue to commute to work, even though it's a little farther, but continue to commute to work, but have a place to go. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And, a couple things that when you had asked about the symptoms, for instance, shortness of breath is terrible. And especially Angie, whenever you listen to her talk, you can tell she's very short of breath. And a lot of people that you talk to will be hoarse and short of breath. The other thing that we really suffer with as a community is brain fog. And so here we are trying to perform our jobs. It's very difficult, very difficult. I had 2 jobs like most Californians, and I had to, after June 16th, one of my jobs, I have worked 1 day. I was unable to go back to that position. Now my husband, we're going to be moving out of state because of my health. And it's just, to have no recognition, and you feel as if, each time you tell your story, you feel you have to justify it when people ask what's going on, because it's not in the regular news. It's only from independent news people and reporters like yourself who are willing to allow us to tell our stories. And so, it's just a very difficult, long, lonely road.
Wow. Michael, when Shiree describes, now moving out of state, and Angie and Brian, they don't live in their home, what the persistence of whatever was dropped in a particular environment, do you have a scientific not understanding, but what do you surmise is the possibilities there for it to be alleviated, or the rain washing it away, or do you have any?
Yeah, I think it would
Take
be
on that.
naive. It would be very naive to think that just the rains and the ambient conditions are going to wash away all the problems. Certainly it depends on what we're talking about. Some of the toxins are long gone. The hydrofluoric acid, we all recognize, we all agree, it's gone. That was emitted during the smoke plume. It's the things that will remain are the more forever chemicals, the things like the heavy metals, the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, the things that are semi-volatile that will form a particle which will stick to surfaces. So there's going to have to be a lot more study done on the soils, on the muds around Elkhorn Slough, on people's houses that were within the plume zone, which is very clearly defined by the Monterey County Air Quality Management District. There are very, very profound plume models around January 16th and the days that followed that show exactly where that plume was based on the PM 2.5 particles that they were able to measure. Well, those PM 2.5 particles, those also contained these heavy metals. So it wasn't just agricultural dust that was, generated because of a tractor driving through a field. This was a chemical toxic fire, and those heavy metals settled, and those are really not going anywhere. They become uh, part of the baseline, part of the matrix of the soil, part of what settle on homes, in homes, on people, people who've been exposed to them. People biologically metabolize them. They come into their systems depending on the toxin itself. We know this through toxicology that heavy metals will affect fatty tissues, sometimes bone tissue, organs, and so forth. So, and it's all they're all different, and so there could be profound effects, both short term during this event, but also medium term, like now, and then long term in the future. What happened was we all recognize that there's a normal baseline of these type of similar type of metals. It would be here in California. There's levels of lithium and cobalt and manganese and so forth in the soil. But you see, what happened was, and what the Vistra fire did, it took that baseline and moved it to here. Okay, and there are toxicities associated with these and people's exposure to these through the foods that they eat, through the lettuce that absorbs heavy metals and the spinach that then we consume, to the air that people breathe. I am very concerned, and from a toxicology standpoint, we need to look at further, the symptoms that were experienced by these people like Shiree and so many others. It's just not anecdotal. This is there are links here between these types of exposures and the symptoms that are recognized to be consistent with these type of exposures that needs to be looked further into because they're not just going away.
And the ramifications, unfortunately, part of perhaps the state level of wanting to avert their eyes is that the agricultural industry is so profoundly right in this zone.
Yes,
And
this is the
what
salad bowl of America.
and what are the deepest implications of that? Uh, you know, that it's reaching people in supermarkets who don't
Right.
think
It,
they were there.
it potentially could be, and that's why these plant products and these consumer products should be tested. That are grown in this immediate area and outlying areas as well. Um, See, the problem with that statement though is that the agricultural community is not required to. Do you really think that they want to know if their spinach is contaminated with elevated manganese to the point where they would have to pull their product off the shelves? I don't think so. So if you really peel that back a little bit, we all would recognize that there is an incentive for them not to ask the question and for not to gather the data. And you see, but the problem is the people who are experiencing adverse health effects, um, that's not going away. That's their reality. And so questions need to be answered from that standpoint. And some of the most recent studies that we've been discussing behind the scenes with toxicologists, with industrial hygienists like myself, is how would we monitor, the biological uptake into a person's body? And one of the areas that is being discussed currently is hair, because heavy metals will be represented in hair, and hair is a perfect mechanism for this, as opposed to blood and urine, which really has a very short half-life, days to weeks, and it's going to be out of your blood and it's going to go somewhere else into tissues, bones, and so forth. But hair is a wonderful mechanism to study because it grows, and it grows like from the root out, and so you could see uh, from a person's hair growth um, data, the rate of hair growth and how far it is away from the hair follicle, that if you have elevated levels of lithium, manganese, cobalt, nickel at that level, and that could correspond with that time period of January 16th or the flare up. Um, that is something that we're looking into studying, and we're developing protocols for that currently. So that more study is needed. And I know, scientists love saying that because they want grant money. More study is necessary. Well, I'm not being paid for any of this. This is just pro bono work because it's meaningful and it's important to get good data out there. And so I'm hopeful that someone will get a grant for studying, whether it's animal hair, like there's plenty of horses out there in the Prunedale area. Study the horse hair, because studying human hair, there's all kinds of other requirements from a disclosure standpoint and authorizations. But for veterinary medicine, they can do that.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that'll happen.
In this, I'm going to wrap this up with just this quote from a Nature magazine, or a periodical that you probably know. I think it's fairly well respected, right? As a you have a thought on that? Nature.
What's the name of the magazine?
Called I don't know if it's a scientific publication called Nature.
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's very respected.
That's
Yes.
what I got that impression. I just wanted to run it by you. So
That's like saying National Geographic. It's like
okay,
right up there.
right, all right. So scientists, a whole group of scientists, have put together a paper that look at lithium-ion battery components. And that the title of the thing, lithium-ion battery components are at the nexus of sustainable energy and environmental release of PER, and something that translates into PFAS, I believe, the forever chemicals. Mm-hmm. And it's a sort of a strong warning, and it's their first paragraph, just underlining, it says that the impacts of clean energy infrastructure merit scrutiny to ensure that reduced CO2 emissions are not achieved at the expense of increasing global releases of persistent organic pollutants, which,
Absolutely.
we are at. This is an opportunity, sadly, tragically, that hopefully we will have the courage to look at squarely in the eye of where we're going with our
Yes.
green
Yeah.
future.
The battery storage technologies, they were fast tracked in California, and they were pushed into our communities without our ability to fully vet them and to fully ask the question about what are you going to do if they catch fire and so forth, and you have a disaster. Um, that genie's out of the bottle now. Okay, and so we need to. I love the name of the Facebook group, Never Again Moss Landing. Let's learn from this mistake so that we don't make the same mistakes in the future in not only our communities, but throughout the country and throughout the world, to learn from these errors, because they're tragic and people have been and continue to suffer. And we should and could and need to do better, or to implement this valuable technology in a safe and responsible manner. It both can be done.
Here, one more thing. I guess I'm going to end it up. A quote from California organic farmers. We envision a world where organic is the norm. And, that is the vision for organic farmers. That's the vision for our civilization, Wouldn't you think that toxins, we say no to toxins and get them out?
Well, that is another big part of the symptoms group. A lot of people, of course, our area is known for, organic produce, going down to our farmers market, being able to buy our fresh fruits and vegetables, as well as being able to grow our own. Many people in the community were growing their own fruits and vegetables. And unfortunately, that has now been destroyed. For instance, in reference to the organic farmers, let's say, from what I have understood, and Michael, you can correct me, please, but that in order for them to basically restore their land, you're going to have to take off the top couple of inches. And I don't even know if now, with all of the heavy rains, if that is even, something that's going to help that. But they would have to take off the top couple of inches. I've heard that they would probably need to grow a crop for I don't know how many cycles in order to absorb what's in there. Like you said, Guy, nobody can financially do that. Who's going to be able to take a cut where they say, okay, for the next so many seasons, we can't grow anything. We've got to clean the land. So not just our organic farmers, which personally, anything within that radius of the Moss Landing fire, I'm questioning. And a lot of the people in the symptoms group are now trying to figure out where they're going to be able to get organic produce that is not still in the area. We don't fault these farmers whatsoever because they would lose so much, right? I mean, family farms and ranches for years upon years have been passed down. They would lose so much. However, when it comes right down to it, if your produce is poisoning people, literally, that is a problem. And the question is, like Michael said, and thank you, Michael, we appreciate everything you have done. We know that you are doing this pro bono. We know that the repercussions could not be great for you. We appreciate it because not having other people to stand up, so we thank you. But in all of this, we're still wondering, like, is my family on the East Coast, do they now have to be like, nope, not eating anything out of these areas? And that's a legitimate concern.
It is.
Completely.
And that question could be answered if we sample them.
Yeah.
If we can answer that question.
Right. But this is, and going back to in the beginning, somebody had said, like, are we asking the right questions?
Right.
Like, oh, did you test your soil? Oh, yes. Well, did you test your soil for heavy metals? No.
Correct. Yeah, they test lettuce all the time for E. coli, salmonella, biological hazards, some limited metals like lead. But are they testing for manganese, nickel, lithium, cobalt? No. It would be that's the purview of research in order to do that. And I hope that that can happen.
Well, I've got to wrap it up there as we can just keep going with so many. One thought leads to the next.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers.
There is. But step by step, if we have the power and the courage to address this and keep on moving as best we can, we're going to advance. We're going to try to go forward.
At the very least, let's set a situation of a chain of events so that this doesn't happen again. Right? We can't undo what's already happened. Right. We can evaluate what did happen, but let's make sure that we don't do this again and hurt people and hurt the environment by action.
And my final, for me, what I would want to see happen if our government does take the time to listen to this, right? If I could make one recommendation, it would be the people who are sick, you need to do something to help them. They're not going to get better. Right now, the EPA is the one who's in charge that says, okay, there's a problem. We need to help them. It shuts every other department down. The EPA needs to do what they need to do the testing they need to do to give out that warning. And yes, I know it's going to be devastating, but there's hundreds of people that are sick that need the help. And when they go to their doctors and the doctors say, sorry, we don't know what to do. Well, let's get those toxicologists together. Let's do some, research. Let's reach out to each and every doctor's office in this area and say, this is what we know so far, and this is what you need to do. But mocking them? No.
No.
Wow. Shiree, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael.
You're
welcome.
welcome.
Been a great conversation to be continued. And all right, take care.
All right.
Thanks, you guys.
It's been great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.